Hello, welcome to another video about variables. This one is about debugging variables, okay? And by debugging, which I talked about in the previous video series for drawing, what I'm talking about is dealing with when things go wrong, okay? And variables do introduce a whole bunch of new things that can go wrong. So it's important to have at least some initial instincts about how to deal with that. So back to the screen, always the screen. Let's look at some code. So I've got code here. I talked about JavaScript objects in a previous video, but I've gone back to just the variables version of that code that moves the circle across the screen, right? Let's go and look at that program. So if I reload it, circle moves across the screen. So that's the desired behavior. It's working. I've gone back to the variables explicitly defined one by one, so 4 variables instead of a JavaScript object, just because what I want to talk about is problems with variables like this. Okay, and like I said, there can be a few problems that come up with variables, and I just want to cover the most common culprits that you're going to run into when you work with this stuff. So the most common problem that you might run into is just forgetting one of your variables. This can happen. You can be writing code and you can forget to declare one. Okay, so let's imagine that we just didn't have circle y. So we were excited, we were writing our program, we declared a bunch of variables, wrote our program, used circle y here because we were like, oh, I'm sure it exists, but it doesn't exist. Yep. So if we go over to our program, we see a blank screen. Now, this happens a lot with programming. When we get things wrong in specific kinds of ways, our program literally doesn't even do anything. And that's a problem, and just looking at a blank screen is not a very helpful way for us to deal with that. So we want to go back to that idea of our JavaScript console. So we go to View, Developer, JavaScript console. There are other ways to get in here. I'm sure you're figuring them out amongst yourselves as well. And if I open the JavaScript console over here, and maybe I'll make it just a little bit bigger so we can see it, we can see a red error message right here. And this is good because unlike a blank screen, this tells me what JavaScript thinks has gone wrong. And that's what we want. So the issue here is called an uncaught reference error. That's the name of the kind of error that we have. Not super helpful, although as you get more experienced with programming, it will start to mean something. And then the most important other thing to look at is the specific nature of the error. It says circle y is not defined. Okay, circle y is not defined. And that should immediately make us start to think, right? Because we would think to ourselves, oh yeah, I'm sure that I have a circle y. So that's weird that this is a problem. The other most important thing about error messages, you've got the kind of error message, the specific description of the error, and the line on which the error occurred. Script.js line 26. Now you could click on this, but you'll end up in a view that's not super helpful. So generally speaking, when I'm debugging, I would read the line number 26 and go find that in my program. So if I go back to Atom, it's very nice. We know that we have line numbers in Atom. We go to line 26, and we remember that the error said circle y is not defined. So it's saying that there's a problem here. Circle y is not defined. So it's telling us what the problem is. The trick here is that we need to realize that this is correct. That is the name of the variable that we wanted. Whenever we see that something is not defined, we should suspect that there's a problem up here with our variable declarations. So we would go looking for circle y, probably after circle x. We see that it's not there, and we know that we need to add it in 250. Save. So if I save that, now that I've fixed it by declaring circle y, I think you just saw there, the circle moves across, and we have no red error message here. So we debugged that particular problem. So that's very common. You can just forget to have one of your variables actually defined up the top, and then when you go to try and use it, it's going to say it's not defined. Okay. A very related issue that's like this is to have typos in your variables. For example, maybe I forget the first C, I'm in a hurry and I forget to type circle y, I type Urkel y. Sorry, not like that. If I do it down here, we'll talk about that issue as well. I write Urkel y in my ellipse, Urkel x, sorry. So ellipse at Urkel x, circle y, circle size. Again, that could happen in the heat of the moment. Obviously, it looks stupid because we know that I'm doing it wrong on purpose. Again, if I go back to my browser, I see another red error message, which is good. It's really important to get used to feeling like seeing these red error messages is kind of good because they're going to help you work out what's wrong. And here we get uncaught reference error, same kind of error. Urkel x is not defined. This one's a lot easier to fix, right? Because we see, sorry, let's not look at that. We see that it says Urkel x, and we can think to ourselves, well, that's not the name of a variable in my program. That's clearly wrong. We see that it's on line 27. So we go down to line 27, which is here. And it says, we look through and we find the thing that it found, Urkel x, and we know, looking up the top, oh, it was meant to be called circle x. So I can just change that to circle x and save it. And again, my program starts working. So that's when you typo a variable when you are using it. The other thing that I did before, which you can have by mistake, is you can typo a variable when you're declaring it. So I might say let Urkel y is equal to 250, but then of course back down in my ellipse, I'm still using circle y, which is the correct name. That's what I intended to call it. And this will again cause an error. The same kind of error as before. Circle y is not defined. So again, we have to have that suspicion. We go to line 27, where circle y is not defined, which is here again. We find circle y. We know that this is correct. So we should always suspect that the problem is with the variable declaration, not with our use of it here. If we're sure that the name is correct here, and we should be very careful and read it very carefully to make sure that it's not something a bit funny going on in here, then we should look up here and find, yes, we declared it incorrectly. We save it, circle y. Now circle y matches up here and down here, so they work, and we get our working program again. Okay, so those are the most common kind of typo sorts of things. We either forget entirely to declare a variable, or we spell it wrong somewhere in our program. We get these reference errors, and that enables us to find the location of the problem and fix it. The other kinds of problems require a little bit more ingenuity. So one thing that is really, really useful to do for the rest of programming, for the rest of your life really, is to be able to see what values are actually inside our variables. Now, we saw in the previous series of videos that we can write messages to ourselves with this special function called console.log, right? And in console.log, we can write all kinds of messages to ourselves, but a really useful thing that we can put into console.log is the name of a variable if we want to print it out. So if I want to print out circle x, for example, I can write console.log, and then inside the parentheses, the argument that I'm going to give, the thing that I want it to print or log, is whatever number is inside circle x. Now importantly, because this is inside my draw function, this is going to keep happening 60 times per second, so it's going to keep printing out the value inside circle x over and over and over again. And that is actually useful sometimes. So if we go back and look at the program, and I'll reload it, we can see this number going up. And this is the position inside circle x. So even after the circle goes off the screen, we can see that the number inside circle x is still going up. The circle is technically still moving to the right. It's just now at positions that don't display in the canvas. Okay? So that's really, really useful potentially for understanding what's going on. For example, if we looked at our program now and wondered, oh, what's happening with my circle? If we looked at this console, we would be able to see, oh, I see it's at position 3900. That's why I can't see it, right? So we can actually reason about what's going on in our program by looking at the numbers that we're printing out, the variables that we're printing out. Now, this looks, awesome. It's quite a lot like the matrix. But it would probably be helpful if we could tell which number this was while we were looking at the messages. So a really useful thing to be able to do in console.log is, instead of just printing out the number, we want to print out a little bit of extra information. And we can do that by, in front of the variable, before we write the variable name, we can write something like circle x in quote marks, and then a plus. So what this is doing is it's saying, take this little message, this literal piece of text, so it's in quote marks, so it's literally going to print out the words circle X and then a colon and then a space. And then after that, we're going to add on whatever value is inside circle X. So it's going to say circle X, colon, and then the number inside circle X. And this is called string concatenation. If you care, it's useful in all kinds of situations in programming. But for now, what we're most interested in is making nice messages in our console.log. Okay, so it's going to print exactly what's inside the quote marks, literally. So it's not going to use the value inside the variable circle X here, because it's inside these quote marks. You can see the whole thing is in green. That tells you it's going to print this literally. And then we have a plus to say also add on after that message the value inside circle X. So if I go and look at my browser now, and I reload, well, we don't need to reload, fortunately, we can see now we're getting this little message that says circle X and then the value. So we can much more easily understand what this number is as it continuously updates in our browser. That's especially useful if we're wanting to print out more than one thing, right? So if we also wanted to print out circle Y, we could say circle Y and then do the same kind of message, just with circle Y instead of circle X. Now if we look at our browser, switching back over and reloading, you can see it's much, much easier to get a sense that circle Y is always 250, it's not changing, and circle X is going up. It's at the 800s, 900s, etc. If we just printed out just circle Y and circle X without any extra information, we'd just see interleaved numbers, right? And that would be much, much harder for us to actually read. So it's always worth, when you're doing your messages in console.log, that you should add some kind of little extra bit of text that helps you identify the specific thing that you're writing, that you're printing out. Now, just for completeness sake, I want to show you another quick way that we can do this exact same thing, which is that if I want to print out circle X, JavaScript recently introduced this nice thing called template strings. I use them all the time, and I suggest that you do too. What they are is that you write your message inside your string of text inside these backtick quotation marks. So the backtick, at least on an English keyboard, is at the top left. It's the key that has the little wiggly line, the tilde on it. So it's a little backwards, diagonally facing dash kind of a thing. It's called backtick. So we can again use this to write text in. So we can say circle X again, same as if when we had those double quotes like we do for circle Y here. But the neat thing about this is, instead of using a plus after the string to add things in, we can actually include the values inside variables by writing this kind of funny looking syntax here, which tells it, instead of writing this literally, add the variable that's inside here. So we write $, and then inside curly brackets the name of the variable that we want to add in to our string there. It does exactly the same thing. It's no different, and it achieves the same thing as this style here, where we have double quotes and then we do a plus to add in the variable that we want to print. It's just a little bit tidier, and as things get more complicated, a little bit easier to use, I think. So I would advise getting used to this idea of using template strings. So backtick, the text that you actually want to print out, and then when you want to include a variable, you can have $, and then inside curly brackets write the variable name, and it will be printed out. So if we go back over here, you can see it's got the same behavior, right? It still writes circle X, colon, space, and then the value inside circle X. So it works as advertised. So template string there, regular string there. It is kind of up to you which one you want to use. Now, the reason that we want to be able to actually do this, print out the values in variables, is that one of the biggest things that goes wrong when we are working with variables is that they get the wrong kind of value inside them. We talked about this a little earlier, where we said, what happens if you don't put something inside a variable? And we said that there's this thing called undefined, right? So for instance, if we don't put a value inside circle Y here, we just say let circle Y so that it exists. We use it down here to draw our ellipse, and we print it out down here in our console.log. If we go and look in our browser, as per usual, we see that the circle doesn't get drawn because circle Y doesn't have anything inside it, so it doesn't know where to draw it. But quite helpfully, we get a very important piece of information to fix our program, which is that we can see that because we printed out circle y, the variable, we can see that it's undefined. And that immediately tells us the kind of problem that we have. There isn't a value inside our variable, right? So if we go back, we're printing out circle y here. We know that circle y must have been undefined here too, because nothing changed it in the interim. And therefore, we're like wondering, well, why doesn't circle y have a value inside it? Eventually, we should end up coming back up here and realizing that we needed to put a value inside of it. Okay, so one strategy that we end up doing a lot of the time in programming, and I'll do it now, is that we end up printing out kind of all of the relevant variables. I'm going to do this all in a template string. So $circle y, and we also probably want circle size. So I use the $signs and curly brackets for circle size, and we probably also want, circle speed. So $circle speed is going off the edge of the screen, quite a long thing, but that's okay. So one long template string inside these backticks, and then every place I wanted to print the value of a variable, I use $sign and curly brackets, $sign and curly brackets, and all of the stuff that's in green here will just be printed out literally. So if I go look at my code here, you can see all of this information is being printed out in my console. Make it a little bit smaller maybe. So circle X is going up, we can see it changing. Circle Y is always 250. Circle size is always 200, and circle speed is always 2. And that is how the program looks when it's working properly. Perfect. So this is a good idea if we start to have problems, is print out all of the kind of implicated variables so that you have more of a chance of seeing what might be going wrong. Okay? And just to illustrate this, one of the big things that might go wrong is when we start doing math with undefined numbers. So if, for example, we were to forget to put a value in circle speed, okay? So obviously we know that we're going to have a problem, which is that circle speed, when we use it down here, is going to be undefined. But because we don't use circle speed when we draw the ellipse, you might kind of expect that the ellipse should still appear. But unfortunately, it does not. And if we pop back over, you can see it's broken over here, right? Nothing's working. The reason for that is that we know that circle speed is undefined, and we're adding this undefinedness, this undefined value, to circle X. And unfortunately, when you add or do any kind of math with an undefined value, such as adding undefined to circle X, what you get out at the other end is this thing called NaN, which stands for not a number. And we can actually see that over in our program, right? Circle X is NaN, circle Y is 250, circle size is 200, circle speed is undefined. And because circle X is NaN, not a number, again, the ellipse cannot be drawn because its X location is not a number. So this is a consequence of circle speed being undefined. We did some maths with this undefined value and it broke our circle X value. So now our whole program is broken. So when we see this kind of thing, and we can see it because we're printing out all of our variables, which is good, we should always suspect undefined as kind of the culprit here. So we should think, oh, circle speed, there's something wrong here. The not a number thing is likely being caused by the undefined thing. So when I want to go and fix this, I wouldn't necessarily think there was something wrong with circle X. I would think there was something wrong with circle speed. And again, I would look for why it's undefined, which is because it has no value in it. So we add our assignment so that it has a value, and again, our program is happy again. Okay? Final thing, this is just a little extra in case you're curious about this part of your browser. Another way to see inside variables instead of using these console.logs is to use your browser's debugger. So let's go have a quick look at that. So if I'm in my browser, I have it here, and I want to look at variables, not this way, but in this other special way. I want to click on the Sources tab here. And this is the debugger. And the debugger, honestly, is kind of scary. It's got lots of different windows, which I find intimidating. It's got this thing called threads, and then these crazy numbers down here. It all does make sense, but it can be a little much when you're learning to program. So please, just don't use it if you feel like it's going to confuse you. However, if you do want to use it, the thing that you can use that is at least easy to use is this thing. In the bottom right, there's a tab called Watch. And what we can do with Watch is basically the same thing we did with our console.logs, which is we can click the plus and we can type in variables. So circle X is a variable, and you can see it already is telling us what the value is in circle X. Circle Y is a variable. It's telling us it's 250. Circle size is a variable, plus, and circle speed is a variable, right? And if I reload the program, you can see that it's got the values of the variables in it, but it's got the values of the variables at the very moment that the program started, right? So circle X started at 0, and then Y was 250, size was 200, and speed was 2. So the only thing that's slightly less great here is that we need to click the reload, refresh button here in order to update the values. And if I keep clicking it, you can see circle X is going up, which is what we see in the console.log as well. So this is a little bit more sophisticated, if you like, but it's also a little bit less live. So it's really up to you whether you want to use that or not. I feel like I should use it because I feel like it's like a big adult form of programming. But the truth is that most of the time I do this kind of debugging, just looking at things in the console and printing out the things I think I need to know about. Maybe I can get better. Maybe I can't. Okay, so before I leave, I'm going to go over to GitHub Desktop, and I'm going to commit learned about debugging variables. Commit that to master, like that. Perfect. Always good to commit each time we do something significant, and that was significant. And I'm going to switch this over to my wonderful face. This face is feeling good. And I'm going to stop this video. We're finished with debugging variables. The main things to remember are that really that variables are our first big chance to run into weird errors, right? Particularly when they end up with variables, with values in them that don't work for the program. Then you end up with these situations where your program doesn't work, but it doesn't tell you anything as to why. And that's when you need to start looking into checking what's inside your variables and making sure that it's sensible. The other thing that I hope is really apparent that I want to re-emphasize is just you should always have your JavaScript console open, right? It's always the right thing to do because it will always be the thing that can help you fix problems that occur in your program. Okay, be on the lookout for typos. See you in the next video.